Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Friday, August 22nd, 2025, and today we're talking about the hidden reality of many profitable farms. We take on a conundrum about when people ask you to help with their gardens, and it is Feedback Friday, so let's do it. All right, happy Friday to you all. I hope everyone is harvesting or resting or planting or just hanging out or whatever it is you hoped to finish your week out with. We've had a hectic couple of days on the farm here of enjoying this dang weather. It's been, barely out of the 70s here, so that's like, 26 Celsius or so, and lightly cloudy. Also, while we're just introing here and talking about, my weather, because you need to know that, I have loved seeing your all's gardens and garden fails and fall prep this week. Keep sending those 20-second clips to farmermike@no-tillgrowers.com. Having the one yesterday from Paul from Japan, where they went out of town for 2 weeks and a storm hit and blew down the trellis, was amazingly poignant. We did not coordinate that. That's just the elegant timing of this wonderful community. So this week, we love your garden prep for the fall videos, 20 seconds. Send them to farmermike@no-tillgrowers.com, or, send your spring prep ones if you're down there in the Southern Hemisphere. Show us what you all got going on. Anyway, it is Friday, which means Feedback Friday, where we explore what you all were saying about this week's topics. On Monday, we talked about cooling the greenhouse in the summer, or at least without AC. At Patricia Brandenburg, 7207, wrote, quote, Zone 6B, also in Eastern Kentucky, I'm finding it difficult to get my cool crops seeded now because of the heat. I've used shade cloths, extra ventilation, but I'm still struggling with my seedlings. My high tunnel temperature is still above 90 degrees on most days, even with the sides up and ends open with multiple fans going. My shade cloths are 50%, but I'm struggling with temperatures. Any suggestions are greatly appreciated. We dug a few test sweet potatoes and they are looking great, end quote. Yeah, I mean, the high tunnel is tough. Like, the big thing with that is that we do in ours is just have that ridge vent. That just helps a lot. But, at some point when you have 90 degree day after 90 degree day, it's just going to get hot in there because the ground starts absorbing a lot of that heat and then, letting it go. But it sounds like otherwise you're doing everything right there. One thing I did want to mention, though, that I'd forgotten about with the greenhouses, not a high tunnel, but greenhouses, is lowering the tables to keep them closer to the ground. Having, tables up high, right, because heat rises, can be part of the issue. Lower is generally cooler. The only challenge being not to lower them so much that, one, you hurt your back picking the trays up and setting them back down, and two, lowering them so much that critters are like, thank you. Also, on the high tunnel front, maybe some mulches would help just to keep it kind of cool at the surface level. Obviously watering, maybe even some misting if necessary, or if you can do that. Obviously with things like tomatoes, that's a little tougher, but water does cool things down, so just making sure there's good irrigation in there. Also, unrelated, at Victor Rodriguez 1478 wrote, quote, I love that you watch soccer. I watch a few games between the Premier League and La Liga from Spain. LOL. Thank you for all the knowledge, end quote. Thanks. And indeed, I love soccer, probably too much. Now, I recognize professional soccer is definitely not the most environmentally conscious thing in the world, but I'm heartened at least slightly by the teams that care. Shouts to clubs like Udinese Calcio, Vermont Green FC, which congrats on the title, y'all, Forest Green Rovers, and etc., who are doing what they can to limit their emissions and even involve their fans. And I've talked before about how I could see, and some clubs are somewhat working towards, a world where stadiums are not just like waste centers, but rather places where people can gather, energy can be collected, compost can be made, etc. Sports are ancient, and to me, they have an important societal place, but they are also inarguably a long way out from making any environmental sense. So I definitely struggle with the waste my beloved soccer generates, and hopefully more clubs will work on promoting more ecological environmental stewardship. I'm here to help if you need me, Brighton. I mean, a soccer nerd can dream. On Tuesday, we talked about the potential of land to manage weather extremes, and at Trish3580 wrote, quote, hey, Jesse, really appreciate your sharing of ecological/environmental news in segment 1. Maybe it's always a segment 1 on a certain day, but haven't paid attention to that. The info you share is priceless. Thank you, end quote. Thanks. And no, it's not always on a certain time or day that I start ranting about environmental stuff, but usually for a little behind the curtain, I will get caught up watching, reading something over the weekend and just want to talk about it on Monday or Tuesday. That's pretty much how things get decided here. In this case, it was Hurricane Katrina. Next week, who knows? knows? Maybe fossil water, which is a fascinating concept I recently learned about. We'll see, though. I asked for a couple examples that day of ways in which you have seen environmental changes, affect your region. At Okatopia said that, quote, locally, a lot of the forest was chopped down to make way for new houses. The wind didn't have anything to slow it down on its way through our town anymore, end quote. Well, that's a bummer. I can attest myself to what trees can do for wind, having just moved from one very exposed farm to one with some nice trees and outbuildings around that help protect the wind. And I'll just say I sleep much better having those wind breaks. At JMASUO, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, wrote, quote, California Central Valley continues to sink because of overpumping of groundwater, end quote. And the sinking thing is true. A recent study from Stanford showed that parts of the Central Valley had sunk by an average of an inch per year since 2006. So that ain't great. New Orleans is also sinking from the poor land management. In some areas, like the airport and unfortunately around some of the levees, it's sinking by as much as an inch per year. Interestingly, a couple of areas have actually risen there too because better water management, suggesting that, who knew, better water and land management can help. Lots of good comments that day on seed saving as well, which is fun. Good on you all. Why do any of this if you're not going to play around and adapt some dang seeds? On Wednesday, we had the great John D. Liu on the podcast, and that was so much fun. I think it's important to see these sorts of projects that in just 15 years can really transform an entire ecosystem. So lots of good feedback there. At Barrister noted, quote, I'm sensing that there can be a tension between agriculture and ecological restoration. I know Jesse and other thoughtful folks will continue to push the idea that small-scale ecological farming is at least compatible with larger ecology goals and hopefully be a strong ally of those solutions, small and large, end quote. Thanks. And to an extent, I do think there's a bit of a tension. Agriculture is in an interesting place where it can be, the cause of ecological degradation or just as easily the solution. Ag can deplete soils, poison waterways, air, all of that stuff. But also, when done well, it can play a huge role in fixing ecosystems and cleaning water and cleaning air and fixing hydrological cycles. Now, ag alone can't do that on the scale that we need it done. Large-scale restoration needs, in many cases, restructuring of waterways, large native plantings, sometimes rest to recover from agriculture and grazing and that sort of stuff, then a good management plan to maintain it. But I think the tension is largely with the public who believe that land would be better off without humans. That is just factually not true. Humans can play and have for millennia played an active role in making ecosystems more vibrant and healthy, restoring and saving hydrological cycles and so on. We are part of the ecosystem, try as we may to not be, and have been for quite a while now, ever. And we bring some helpful tools to the mix, one of them being ecological agriculture. Then on Thursday, we talked about getting bugs out of your lettuce, and Insane Lampshade asked, quote, how do you deal with eggs stuck to lettuce/other leafy greens, often too small to notice and don't fall off easily as a bug when washing, end quote. Okay, yeah, great observation here. Ladybug eggs, for instance, are often on the undersides of leaves, and it can be hard to spot them. And really, this is the other thing you were doing in the micro inspections, is looking for those sorts of egg sacs. So yeah, as you're inspecting, like I discussed the other day, you're just like picking out leaves with eggs as best you can. The reality is on an ecological farm, it will be impossible to get 100% of everything that was in your field out before it gets to the customer. I mean, not without like a machine that does it. However, you try to get as much as you can, especially the more ick factor things like bugs. And then if a customer complains, just do what you can to remedy the situation. Do I wish the public understood that a bug in their food is probably the greatest thing they can see? Yes. But, that's not likely going to change anytime soon. Bugs mean nothing was sprayed on the lettuce, or at least, not recently. So to me, that's a good sign. I kind of wish I found more bugs in my food. But anyway, we're not there yet, nor will we likely ever be. So just do your best. Also that day, I mentioned a restaurant in a greenhouse in Lexington, Kentucky at Scott Freeze 6831 wrote, quote, the restaurant Jesse is referring to in the video is called Kentucky Native Cafe. It is located in the back of Mickler's greenhouse. I highly recommend it. This is a very relaxing area with good food and a great atmosphere. Look it up if you are ever in that area, end quote. And yeah, I couldn't remember the name offhand, but it is truly a gem. Love that place, worth stopping by if you're in Lexington, but also just the idea of having a warm place to go in the winter, like in a greenhouse and have a meal. That's pretty awesome. So shouts to that. Anyway, great stuff as always this week, friends. Couldn't be more proud of our comments section, and shouts to John D. Liu for his time. Really, really fun to talk to him. Wish we'd had more time to continue on that conversation, maybe for a later day. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, some of the hidden realities of the perfect farm, BRB. Hey, so I almost forgot to mention that we have some new merch. in the store, like these Soil Nerd beanies for your fall. It's on its way. It's happening. And we also got another one. Hold on. There it is, a little no-till growers love. So you can pick those up at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work and show that you're a soil nerd. Nice.
Hey Jesse, Brian here at Snowflake Farm. As a first-year market gardener, the summer production is creeping to a halt and we're pivoting to the fall. Quicker than I had anticipated, but still being able to fill out a table.
Farmer Claire Coleman here from the Winter Growers Podcast. Did you know that I also founded Real Farmer Care, a nonprofit that supports farmer well-being? From my own experiences farming, I knew firsthand that this type of support was missing from ag, so I decided to do something about it. As of today, there are over 500 farmer recipients of a $100 self-care award, with more applying daily. If you'd like to help, each $100 donated supports one new farmer. Visit realfarmercare.com to donate and learn more. Again, that's realfarmercare.com.
If you, the listener, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere the questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question, though maybe more of a comment, comes to us from Patreon member Alex Smith, who writes, quote, "Greetings. I've always been a bit of an ever learner and enjoy educating myself on numerous aspects of my business and interests. I voraciously consume farm books, podcasts, etc., and pick other farmers' brains as often as I can. That being said, with the abundance of content out there, especially on social media, it can become discouraging knowing that I'm not as profitable, productive, or polished as Farm X. Or, as another farmer put it to me, why would I listen to someone tell me everything I'm doing wrong? The flip side is that the room for improvement is also a motivator to achieve more. Your advice and perspectives are always appreciated. Peace." End quote. So first off, thank you, Alec. And I hope this show doesn't make anyone feel that way. Or at very least, I do try to share failures as much as I can so that you can see, well, I too get things wrong, probably more than I should. Or I make bad decisions, or I lose a crop, or whatever. And I have also done segments, or at least partial segments, on this idea of comparison being the thief of joy, that sometimes seeing someone else's operation can make what you're doing feel small or unsuccessful. It's one of the worst things about the social media era. Lives are curated in a way that we think impresses other people, but mostly, or at least often, just makes them feel less than. Sure, there is some inspiration to be had there. I've learned things through social media without a doubt, and fun to be had. But as somebody on the outside, it's okay to just have a farm and garden and love that farm or garden, even if it's not as perfect as someone else's farm or garden. That's okay too. I guarantee their farm or garden is not as perfect as it looks either. A lot of times, the unseen or less obvious reality is that many of the farms and farmers with the nicest stuff just either have the startup capital to get there from previous work or family, or they have a side gig that bankrolls it. Some inherited their land, some have trusts, I'm sure. That isn't to say there are no farms that start with very little and build into something envious. That is certainly the case. But truth be told, a lot of those are not always the ones you see the most online. In fact, and maybe I've said this before, but one of the huge advantages or boosts my own farm got was when my mother passed away back in 2018. We found out that she had a small life insurance policy. She had never been great with money or planning. Love you, Mom. So it was a huge surprise to us, but that was like a sudden $30,000 boost that helped us to fast track building and buying the farm that we are currently on. Now, we were at the time like definitely 3 years out from that opportunity, saving what money we could from our farm, but that definitely like made things faster and made things easier. We also had family who lent us money for our last farm and our original down payment on the land where we built our old cabin, a cabin we partially funded through a crowdfunding campaign. We've been given 2 or 3 old vehicles by our family. So although Hannah and I have started with almost nothing and worked second jobs and such to get our farm going, we also got lucky breaks several times along the way. So often, for that reason, when it comes to talking about starting farms and farm businesses, I'm hesitant to use my own farm as a model because it required a bit of good fortune sprinkled along the way that others will not necessarily have access to. Another thing that gets overlooked in conversations about gardens and market gardens is that running a business is likewise not for everyone. And there's no law out there that says your farm or garden should be your only income or it needs to be perfect. That's a silly and unrealistic standard. People have been using farming as their side gig to, say, teaching, or conversely, teaching as their side gig to farming forever, or being a mechanic or a locksmith or whatever else you do. Starting a successful farm business really boils down to having a great plan, adequate startup capital, a reasonable amount of growing experience, and making pragmatic choices along the way and not rushing it. Then It takes a ton of hard work. It certainly can be done in a profitable way that builds itself and provides for the farmers, absolutely. But that requires a certain personality and great preparation. In some cases, it may require other people, other owners, to make it truly successful and sustainable. Our farms do not need to be perfect or polished or be as profitable as every other farm. If we are, enjoying them and they are feeding people and they are paying for themselves and paying us and engaging positively with the local ecology, we should strive to make them profitable, obviously, 100%. You have to make a living. You can't spend more than you make to farm. And we should strive to make them successful and not stressful, very much so. But that may not look like every farm you see, because the systems they use that help them grow an acre of, say, like intensive greens or whatever, oftentimes did not come from them growing an acre of intensive greens to start. And that's okay too. Startup capital is part of starting a business, but it's important we keep that perspective so we don't look at what we're doing and think, I must be doing it wrong. You may be doing it better. You just may not be as well funded. You may have a longer timeline. You may not have as much experience, or the side gig that they have that helps bankroll it. Or you may just be enjoying goofing off in the garden a little more than they do. Guilty. And so sometimes things look a little wilder. Anyway, rant done. You all tell me what resonates here and how you don't let comparison be the thief of joy or thief of the pride you have in everything that you've accomplished yourself. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, let's not get sucked into being someone's free landscaper. Cool? Be right back.
Hi No Dig Nerds, Joe, Muddy Puddles Farm, UK again. This is my epic fail. This is my wonderful buckwheat and phacelia mixed cover crop. And here is the same crop where the sheep broke in.
Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. We know it's peak season, you're busy, but the messages you send now are what drive renewals later. That's why Farmhand is offering free instant access to their farmer-built newsletter builder. No demos, no setup fees, just drop your logo, upload your list, and start sending farm-branded emails that boost sales, engage members, and save you hours each week. Get free access today at farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. All right, so there was a fun and interesting comment/question on Tuesday's episode where at times I pee myself. Oh, I see what you did there. IP, like IP address. Anyway, they write, quote, I got a question. What do you do about friends and family that are getting into gardening, which is fantastic, but they're not really getting into gardening? I go over and do a ton of prep work and help them structure their layout, bring in compost or cover crop or whatever that we end up doing. But then, like right now, multiple people begging me to come over there and fix their garden because they did not keep up with it through the summer. And I mean, when I say I helped them with prep work, all they had to do was lightly hoe and water and keep the rotation going. That's not what happened in any of my situations. So my question is, how do I politely get out of helping them? And how do I instill motivation and responsibility into them, LOL? And if that's impossible, how do I detect the ones that are going to lazy out? Thank you, Jesse. And your book is so good. I recommend it to everyone, end quote. Okay, so thank you. Thank you for the kind words about the book. Love to hear that. Glad it's been helpful. Second, this is a fun and interesting situation because it's not like someone saying, hey, will you come out, help me figure out what I'm doing wrong with this, sourdough starter, but rather, hey, will you come over and do one of the hardest, most time-consuming hobbies imaginable for me? Basically, what you're doing is free landscaping, and that should probably kindly be explained to them, as you suggested. However, some of this sounds like it's maybe just a little bit of a setup and communication issue. Now, obviously, hindsight is 20/20 and all that good stuff, but before installing new gardens like this for someone, we should all make sure to detail what it means and what it will take to maintain it. Otherwise, we will all end up in a situation like this because although sure, if you layered massive amounts of compost over a garden, that person could maybe get away with a year without needing any sort of weeding really, but the chances of that are relatively low, and the amount of upfront work, depending on the amount of space they want in gardens, would be tremendous. Then the upkeep would be significant year to year, and they should understand that responsibility from the get-go, because if they do, they will not likely want a garden, or at least not one that big. They should definitely be a part of that initial setup too, so they can figure out how big they really want the garden based on the installation work, because that's going to be representative of what it's going to take to keep it up. Of course, that's not going to help you now. And if they didn't hear that in the beginning, well, you may have to take the L on that and say you should have been more clear about how much active work it was going to take to maintain it. Keep in mind, or rather make sure they keep in mind, that people get paid really, really well to do the types of work that you're doing. Again, landscapers and gardeners. And that it's not a simple task that anyone can just bust out quickly. I might also suggest telling them that they should shrink their gardens to what they can maintain themselves. It sounds like how much ever land they had prepped this year was just too much. How much could they scale it back to make it reasonable? Also, maybe give them some quick fixes. Like, if a garden bed gets out of hand, mow it and cover it with a thick layer of hay or straw. So they, the emphasis on they here, don't have to do a ton of work to reclaim that bed. Now, if this is family, that makes it a little bit more sensitive and complicated. But like I said, sometimes the best thing to do is just say, I should have been more clear about what the garden would require. So let's turn this into something you can manage yourself. Until someone has gardened themselves, it's hard to describe how hard this work can be. But as the phrase goes that I got from our friends Mikey and Kez down in Australia, I should check in with them. They'd make a great interview. Clear is kind. Just be clear with the people who you did these gardens for, even though it's hard. Because not doing that could build resentment, or they may not understand why you just ghosted them next year when they come calling again. Anyway, great question, and I love these little specific conundrums we all find ourselves in from time to time. Hannah and I once had some family assume we were really good at tree management just because we grew vegetables and asked us to do a bunch of tree work. We were happy to oblige, but there's definitely a disconnect between what people think we do and how much they can ask us to do and what we have the capacity to do. So anyway, farmers and gardeners do not have the capacity in most instances to do more farming. So be kind and do not ask farmers to do extra work that you could do and should do for your own health and enjoyment yourself. Anyway, I think that's it for this Friday. I've got more Premier League action to attend to this weekend. Let's go Brighton and Hove Albion. Our Louisville Racing team is also fighting to stay in the NWSL playoffs. So if you need something to root for, there's that on Sunday. My kids have games for me to coach as well. So always important to remember that fact. And of course, we will likely take in some more nature this weekend as well, in all of its glory. Going to be a fun and busy and maybe even relaxing weekend. We shall see. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor this show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear.
Time to let go.
I'll wait. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soul Handbook. Oh, I rocked the corduroy today. That's fun. At notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of August, which is slowly fading, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Chloe. Chloe's fun to say. And Patrick Weaver. Keeping it going. All right, so our 4 recipients of the letter that we all remember from this week's story, who had just inherited 4 different plots of land and are, all standing there before the lawyer, who starts to tell them that the reason they were all selected for this opportunity was because the skills they bring to the table. They knew they were looking for land, but also they knew the types of farmers that would maybe work together well. So the estate's owner had been a billionaire, right? Because they'd have to be, but also a private detective, because billionaires need something to do, I guess, and had spent time envisioning this land for the past decade of his life. Basically, he picked 3 different types of farmers and decided to give them their own properties, but wanted to incentivize collaboration among the 4 farms by spreading the infrastructure over the land. Then our young couple asks, they're farmers, but why us? The lawyer tells them, well, this business needs people who understand numbers and who love farming. Finding you was the hardest job because you would be surprised how few people who want to farm actually understand what it takes financially, and conversely, how many people understand finances who want to farm. And it's true, our young couple both work as accountants and had already mapped out the entire budget enterprise for all 3 of these types of farms. So that was convenient and a little creepy on the part of the, the billionaire detective, whatever. Okay, so free land, taxes. What's the catch? The farmers ask the lawyer. The lawyer responds, well, the catch is you have 24 hours to decide if you want to accept the offer and build a giant farm here together. Will they do it? Would you? That is for your imagination, because this story's over. Anyway, that's the end of Co-Opportunity Farm. I still like What the What. Anyway, thanks for watching and or listening. We'll see you on Monday. Bye.